Good morning. So this is the video that's intended to replace this week's tutorial. Unfortunately, um, you're just going to get a talking head. I spent some time this morning trying to set up some ways to provide additional displays for those who are more visual learners, and the technical requirements are beyond my capacity at this time. It's a hardware problem. I know what needs to be done, but it's going to require spending some money that I don't have right now. So, um, anyway, uh, this week's tutorial was going to be about co-tenancy. And specifically, we were going to talk about some of the ways that co-tenancy gets complicated. And this involves three things, right? It involves severance, it involves fractionation, and it involves equity. So we talked about equity some in the lecture yesterday. We talked in principle about severance and fractionation last week, and then we sort of worked through a little bit some of the things yesterday in the lecture, but let's talk a little bit more about severance and fractionation, right? Fractionation is where in a tenancy in common, um, the co-tenancy becomes distributed across too many owners for the ownership interest to really be taken seriously, right? The 1/1000th of 1% owner. Um, And then in severance, that's the process whereby joint tenancies get converted into tenancies in common. And we I want to remind you that if there's not a reason to think otherwise, such as some of the presumed tenancies in common that involve unequal shares, or a statement of shares of an unequal distribution, we presume that the tenancy in common is distributed evenly. Um, and so the question becomes, what happens when these processes of severance and fractionation start to combine? And so I've written a few problems for you to work through. Um, One of them I will talk you through in this video. And then you're going to submit a written assignment for the others that I've written, that I will post on eLearning. So the first thing that you need to do, since this is just a talking head, is you're going to need to write down the problem, okay? So this is the 3-minute 17 mark in this video. Here's where the problem starts. A, B, C, and D own a piece of property jointly in fee simple. D sells their interest to E, who promptly dies, leaving as their heirs F, G, and H. After these events, how are shares in the property distributed? Okay, if you need to go back and hear that again so that you can write it down, go back to 3 minutes and 17 seconds, play it again. Okay, the next step in the process is to sketch out the relationships for yourselves. So we start with A, B, C, and D owning the property jointly. And if it helps you to draw a little square on your piece of paper and write A, B, C, and D and divide it into 4 pieces, because joint tenancies are always divided evenly. There are no shares in a joint tenancy. And we have no words of separation. No ownership in shares, no ownership in common, no ownership share and share alike. So there is a joint tenancy. Okay, I haven't told you that we're in Antigua or Dominica, so don't assume a tenancy in common. You have to have the separation language. So in the fact pattern, D sells their interest. This is an act of severance. it severs D's interest from the joint tenancy and creates a tenancy in common between, on the one hand, D and A, B, and C as joint tenants on the remaining property. So D's share is 25% because of the even shares of the joint tenancy. And then the remaining shares, the 75%, continues as a joint tenancy owned by A, B, and C. So D leaves, E steps in, E drops dead, and F, G, and H each receive equal shares of E's tenancy. Okay? So we have this undisturbed joint tenancy. The 25% that E owned is split 3 ways into 8 1/3% shares. And so the complete answer to the problem is A, B, and C own 75% of the property jointly, with F, G, and H each holding 8 1/3% shares as tenants in common with the joint tenancy. And that's it. That's all you have to say. If you interpreted the series of events correctly, this answer follows as the night follows day. So you don't have to give me any more explanation than that. I've written 3 more problems. I'm going to upload them to eLearning. I would like you to submit written answers to them on eLearning no later than November 2nd, then noon on November 2nd. These will be graded for accuracy, so take care, do them carefully, and feel free to ask questions. Okay? The last thing that I want to flag for you as a possibility that may play out in joint tenancy is that it is possible for heirs to predecease owners. Okay, so going back to our problem, when E drops dead, what happens if their heir F has predeceased? Well, that's going to be a question for you in the problem. And the answer is that it depends on the jurisdiction. In some places, let me start by saying that everywhere you go, the heirs of the predeceased heir step into the shoes of their ancestors. So F is already dead. When E dies, F's heirs step into their shoes. But the size of those shares may change depending on the process. Okay? There are 2 ways to approach this. One is called per stirpes, the other is called per capita. I do not care which one you use because this is not an estates class. And so whichever way you do it, as long as you do it correctly, will be fine. Okay? So per stirpes means that F's 1/3 share, right? F, G, and H are equal heirs. They each get 1/3 of E's share. F's 1/3 share gets split between their heirs. So that's per stirpes. Okay? Per capita means that we divide E's share among the number of heirs that are present. So if F gets replaced by 2 heirs, now E's share is being spread across 4 individuals, so it gets split 4 ways. If F gets replaced by 3 heirs, now there's 5 people taking E's share, and so on, and so on, and so on. I don't care whether you use per stirpes, where you sort of measure out the shares at each generation and then split them as necessary, or per capita, where you count up the number of heirs and split it that way. Doesn't matter to me, as long as you do it correctly. Okay? So that's the situation. I'm going to upload the problem on eLearning shortly. You'll have until Sunday to get it done. Actually, I'm going to take that back. You're going to have until next Wednesday to get it done. Noon on next Wednesday to get it done. And we'll see you guys. No, I'm sorry. You're going to have until November 22nd. Yeah, still noon on a Sunday, but it's the next Sunday because this week you're going to be doing the redo of the estates assignment. So that's what we're going to do. And I will see you guys tomorrow in the lecture. Take care.